Hi, this is Justin Coletti of SonicScoop, and today we have on a special guest, Matt Lange, an electronic musician and producer who, in addition to his own music, has done sound design for the trailers to so many major motion pictures, including Blade Runner 2049 and Ready Player One. He's put out albums on Deadmau5's label, Mousetrap Records, and today he's going to walk us through his process of using effects creatively on the production side, building up beats, building up tracks from scratch, using effects to create new rhythms, new sound ideas, almost treating them like yet another instrument inside the arrangement. This one is free to the public thanks to our friends over at Soundtoys. If you haven't tried out their stuff yet, you've absolutely got to. Go over to soundtoys.com where you can try out anything they make for free for 30 days. All right, without any further ado, let's get right into it. Matt, take it away.
Matt Lange here. I'm a longtime fan and user of the Soundtoys plugins, and I'm going to show you some of my favorite ways to use them. So one of the ways I use Soundtoys most frequently is using Filter Freak on a bass sound. And this is something that's really integral to my workflow. I always really like these low, subby, restyle basses that kind of originate from drum and bass. And I use the Filter Freak to make this happen. So without Filter Freak, this is my bass sound. But with Filter Freak, it sounds like this. And it's so simple. All I'm doing is taking a low-pass filter. I'm using 6 poles, and my frequency is way down. If you control-click, it'll show you the actual frequency. It's set to 135, but I just did it by ear. And it just takes that just gnarly kind of and just makes it nice and subby. It sounds great. It's so simple, and it works every time. But let's get a little bit more complex. So I have another bass sound in this little demo I made, and it starts also with that same raw bass sound. Sounds like this. With Filter Freak, now it sounds like this. So let's talk about what's going on here. First of all, it's modulation, and I am using the rhythm mode in modulation right here. And if I open up the tweak page, you will see I actually drew in my own step sequence. And this is something where I have it synced to tempo. I have the subdivision set to 1 bar, and then I just drew in my steps. As simple as that. But make sure your smoothing is set to none if you want a step sequence. Otherwise, you can, of course, smooth it out. But I wanted a hard step. So I just drew these in. I just used the subdivisions of the bar right there to make my choices. And then I set the filter to be a 4-pole bandpass filter. No resonance. And my frequency is set pretty low. It's at 124, but it's getting modulated by the step sequence. So once you add these things together, you get this. And also, I have my input cranked a bit because that's going to give it some nice overdrive, a little bit of saturation. And that's it for that sound. Now, let's take a look at how to make a pad nice and warpy. So I'm going to take off all of my effects, and I just have my raw sound, and it sounds like this. So there are actually 2 filter freaks in a row here, and let's talk about what's going on. The first one, similar to what we did before, I have it set this time to a 2-pole low-pass filter. My frequency is set to 138, also pretty low. My resonance is about 1/3 of the way up, and my modulation is set to about 1 o'clock. And then once again, like I did before, I have a step sequence that I built in there. Smoothing is set to none. And I also have the rhythm this time set to be a half note. So even though this shows 16 steps, basically it's a half note. So it's actually going to be playing at 16th notes as opposed to 8th notes. So pretty cool because it's in motion. Now let's open up the second Filter Freak. And this time I'm using Filter Freak 2. So I have 2 filters and they're running in series. The first one is a low pass filter. And that is also getting modulated by the rhythm. If we open up Tweak, we'll see what's going on here. And I actually made my own shape once again. So it's loosely dotted eighth or dotted quarter, followed by another like an 8th note bump right there. And that's somewhere in between a quarter and dotted quarter. But I just used it by ear. I did what sounded best. And then the second filter is set to a high pass filter. So these two things are getting pushed together. It's kind of like a bandpass filter, but I designed really like the shape of the filter myself, and it's a 4-pole filter on the low pass, and then it's a 2-pole on the high pass. So without the first one, this is what the motion of the second filter freak sounds like. And you can hear the mix isn't 100% wet. That's because I wanted some of the high end, especially coming out of the stepped filter, to really cut through. So totally wet would be this. Let's bring it back. And now when we engage the first filter freak with the step filter, it sounds like this. Next, I have some Pan Man. And what Pan Man is doing is, once again, my own shape of moving around the stereo field. So open up the tweak page, and you can see for the first beat, it basically does nothing. And then on the second beat, it slowly moves over to the right side and then quickly back up to the left. And then on the last beat, it just does a quick back and forth. And that just gives it this nice stereo motion. And of course, smoothing is set to soft because I don't want it to be hard pan, or I don't want, basically hard stops. I want this to be smooth. And then lastly, I added an Echo Boy. And the Echo Boy, it's just a quarter note. It's a regular delay, nothing crazy, but it just gives us some extra space. I have my low cut turned up just to get rid of any low end, and my high cuts turned up just a little bit, just to shave off some of the highs. And I'm using the Memory Man setting just because I've always liked the way a Memory Man sounds. And it just, slightly degraded, slightly bandpass style of delay. So all together, it sounds like this. And then you can hear that kind of like warbly feedback. Echo Boy is just, it's always been my go-to delay for everything, whether it's vocals, synths, guitars. I use Echo Boy more often than any delay, period. It just sounds absolutely phenomenal. And so if we put these things together, now with our low Reese and our warpy bass, so that gives us a lot more rhythmic complexity, and it really makes, these basses and the pads dance around. So it's really nice. Let's try putting it on some drums. So first, I'm going to take a look at this snare drum that I have. And without any effects, just sounds like this. So just your simple synthesized snare. And first, I'm setting it to just a little plate, and it's a very short little plate, about as short as it can possibly be. Modulation's turned on, and some low cut. Simple as that. But really where the fun happens is the crystallizer that I'm setting it to as well on a different bus. And the other thing is I actually automated the send. So it only happens on the second hit, or every other hit, I should say. And this is what the crystallizer sounds like without, I have a little plate after it, but let's bypass that for now. Here is the crystallizer. So you get that nice reverse delay that sucks in right after the snare hit on an eighth note. And the way I had this set up is my pitch is set to 0, my delay is all set to 0, but my splice set an eighth note. I have a reverse delay. And then with the delays themselves, I am offsetting the two channels, the left and the right side, by 21 cents, and that makes it nice and wide. So that is how I get this very stereo spread of a reverse delay. And now I add some little plate after, and this is a longer little plate, and it's mixed down, also some low cut, but not as much as before. Modulation always, because modulation is beautiful. Cool. And let's add the original plate of the snare in as well. So it just has a nice tail, and it fills in these rhythmic gaps. So if we add a kick drum in here, let's hear how that sounds. And then I have some high-end percussion on top. And without any of the Soundtoys plugins, it's pretty simple. It sounds like this. It's just, high-end clicks for the most part. And I'm going to add some phase mistress because I always like the way phase mistress can add a lot of these like resonant frequencies to high-end. And I use it a lot for any kind of like glitchy sounding percussion. With phase mistress, it sounds like this now. So still pretty quiet, but it just adds some resonant peaks, which I like. If we open up the tweak page, you will see that my style is the PM, the phase mistress 3x14. But then I also, once again, drew in my own curve that goes across the course of 2 bars. And this is going to essentially shape the direction of the modulation. So that is what's giving it the movement and the character of the phase mistress. And then lastly, I have some double lock added in after. And what this is doing, this is really just crunching it. And I should say crushing it. I'm not actually crunching it at all, according to the UI. But this is going to bring up, the clickiness and the phasiness of, the phase mistress that I added to this percussion. So if we add that with the rest of the percussion, we get this. So it's really cool sounding, it's rhythmically complex, and it's interesting. Play it together, sounds like this. So those are some of my favorite ways to use the Soundtoys plugins. Like I said, I've been using them forever. They sound phenomenal, and they're always inspiring. So do yourself a favor and check them out.
All right. Big thanks to Matt Lange for letting us take a peek into his process. If you want to try out any of the Soundtoys plugins he used in this presentation, just go over to soundtoys.com where you can try out anything they make for free for 30 days. Thanks for hanging out with me. See you next time.